Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Bomispirit. This is going to be a very different episode than you're used to watching and or listening to. Episode is going to be all audio, and today we're actually going to cover art, spirituality, importance of art, and anything else that comes of that conversation. I actually have my first guest with me today. His name is Trevor Crandall. He's a pretty badass gaming artist and an all-around artist in his own right, also a photographer with a lot of experience, who is also waking up. And so, as we know, there's a lot of people waking up right now, so I thought he'd be a really good person to kind of just talk to about everything that's going on as far as art in the spiritual community. I know a lot of you are artists. I know a lot of you are starting to put visions into your own art. I know some of you are even activated by art, which is going to be an interesting topic to get into. Trevor, thank you so much for hanging out with me and being here and everything. How are you doing?
Hey Lola, thanks for having me. This is a pretty cool thing. I'm kind of excited and curious to see what unfolds. I'm doing awesome. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, no problem. So, why don't you talk a little bit about your experience with art? Because you have a very long, extensive background in art and all kinds of art at that.
Sure. I've done art pretty much my whole life. Kind of for fun when I was younger. It was just kind of my outlet or maybe my escape or my inspiration. So just drawing monsters and crazy stuff like that. And I think a lot of that just came from inspiration from nature. As a kid, you're chasing frogs and snakes and all that kind of stuff. So in a way, it seems like art is like an extension of your appreciation for the world around you. And so it was always kind of a hobby, and I always kind of dreamt of doing it professionally, but was never really sure how or what.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 45 now, so this is like growing up in the 80s or the 90s, kind of pre-internet when you didn't really know what was around you. And yeah, just kind of got lucky at one point when I was around 30 to kind of stumble on digital art and video game art and find a pretty cool outlet for my passions. And then yeah, it was kind of off to the races after that.
Yeah, digital art is very interesting. It's like to see the evolution of, classic sketches, paintings, sculpting, and now so much art is digital. And like even when you go into the realm of music and how that's kind of evolving in frequency. And like I said, art in the spiritual community, we're starting to see a lot more come out about embodying symbols, basically esoteric symbols, and people are actually getting activated by it, which is kind of amazing. A lot of people I think are really wanting to break out into the art world and like basically live off of their art and kind of monetize their own passion, especially those that are using it for activation. So as far as breaking out into the art world, because I'm not an artist, I can't imagine what that's like and what that entails, especially now that it's evolved so much, and with what you do, you probably see a lot of people starting to break out into that, right?
We're definitely having a bit of an artistic renaissance right now. Pretty huge, I think. It's been happening for the last couple decades, the last 20 years, I guess, as, video games and real-time content and all this stuff has been just sort of expanding exponentially over the years. There's more and more outlets and avenues and opportunities to create art and make a living for art and pursue art and learn art. Been a pretty amazing thing. Like when I first started my training like 20 years ago, I was going to like a classic art school, like an atelier that's very traditional for, drawing and painting like the masters. And I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of a like celebrity there because I was the video game artist because it was all very traditional. And now that same school, like video game artists are probably their primary clientele. And over the course of the last 20 years, there's been so many schools that have popped up both physically and online. Like it's extraordinary to see the amount of art schools that have been created in the last 20 years. So it really is growing exponentially. And our tablets and our phones and just the way our media is evolving, there's just such a huge sort of medium there for people to explore and contribute to. So it's a pretty exciting time to be an artist. And then you could probably even go off on a little bit of a tangent about political stuff or whatever and all the funky stuff we have going on now, and that's a whole other role or avenue or purpose for artists. as well. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for artists out there.
Yeah, and like you mentioning political art, I mean, we're in a crazy, crazy time. Well, crazy and exciting, depending on what lens you're looking
Yeah,
through, right? As far as what's going on right now. And I think for artists, like you said, there's a lot of fun to kind of be had, like being creative about what's going on right now and including that in your art. I mean, we don't have to get into too much specifics about what's going on
yeah,
right now because that can turn into like 5 hours of
yeah.
content right there, right
But we
there.
all know things are
Um,
funky and up in the air, and artists throughout history have always sort of played a role in times of change and chaos or uncertainty or revolution or whatever. So it's kind of neat that an artist's role is sometimes more than just making neat pictures or entertaining people. A little bit more of a divine calling, actually, if you think about it in the grand scheme of things, the role of artists throughout history.
Yeah, because I feel like there's a lot of truth in art. I mean, there's all kinds of art, right? But if we're speaking about visuals, like that, very much like I'm working with nothing. I'm working from nothing. I'm working with basically just my mind and my emotion and what I want to convey. Because not all art is like that. Like some art, you're already working with something that's already there, right? But with art, where you're really creating from nothing and it's really of your own essence and really of your own mind, you can really put a lot of just blatant, untainted truth out there.
Yeah, it's a powerful medium on a lot of levels. Sorry. Yeah, there's a lot of
That's
opportunity to sort of create and manifest vision and ideas and themes. A big part of how we think and see the world is really through symbolism. I mean, words are just symbols, and art is a much more pure form of symbolism. And so you can communicate really powerfully and effectively with art. In some cases, maybe even more powerfully and effectively than with words. And so
yeah.
when you kind of look at it like that, you realize, it's a pretty extraordinary tool to channel thoughts and ideas and feelings and emotions and whatever you have inside you that, you want to let out.
Yeah, a picture's worth 1,000 words,
Yeah,
right?
indeed.
And when it comes to video games, because I know that is something that you do invest a lot of time in, is your video game art. So many people play video games, and there's been a lot of talk in the spiritual community of, virtual reality, and is that really part of where we're going in our state of consciousness? Virtual reality is such a big part of video games too. Do you see anything playing out as far as video game and video game art is concerned with how it relates to VR and consciousness?
Yeah,
I know it's a loaded question.
it's a pretty valid question, and it's something that I've been observing and paying attention to and watch evolve over the years. And that's where you kind of go down the matrix rabbit hole or whatever, as far as, are we living in a simulation? Like, statistically speaking, I think we are. And then it's so interesting to see video game technology, or it's also called real-time technology, to see that
Mm-hmm.
technology evolving. And it's, with video game characters and all that kind of stuff, and they're becoming more lifelike, and their hair is more realistic, and you can see the pores on their skin, and, sweat dripping down their face. And every couple years, things get more realistic. And then virtual reality has been coming online for the last couple years. And it's like, how close are we going to get to accurately recreating reality before our reality becomes a simulation? And if we are going to be doing that, then who's to say it's not a simulation already? And then, we start getting into the idea of the singularity and the techno future that is taking form. And I think, realistically, the next, like, life isn't just biological, like evolution, it's not just a biological thing. So life, we're seeing it evolve in technology, you know, and so in 20 years or something like that, with massively powerful computers and extraordinary software and just exponential growth, what kind of reality are we living in 20 years? Because we already have virtual reality now that can be pretty, your brain almost can't tell the difference. You might be able to tell the difference analytically. Things might not look quite right, but your brain a lot of times still responds like it's real. If we're experiencing a
Yeah.
lot of our reality in virtual reality, that's in a way an extension of our consciousness and our experience of life. That's a really sort of interesting thing to consider, that's for sure.
Yeah, because even just what you said, right? It's an extension of consciousness. So, like, if I were to develop a video game and whatever I wanted to run with, it's like it's coming from my own consciousness, my perspective, my higher self, so to speak. So, whatever world I create is really almost just a manifestation of just myself in a lot of ways. And I mean, there are artists that like to do certain things, like you were saying, how you literally like to do monsters. So, kind of getting into that, like, just to have fun with this a little bit, because you really like monsters, and if you had your own free run of creating whatever virtual reality game you wanted, what kind of game would you make?
I don't know so much if I would want to make a game as I would want to just make some experiences. I mean, I've already kind of got my plans in the back of my head. Once I'm sort of perhaps financially and professionally independent, I'll just kind of be like some sort of low budget Tony Stark with my virtual reality goggles and my 3D printers or whatever. But again, like, art is about that creative process. I mean, for me, and there's, different avenues of it, but for me, like, creating worlds, and especially, I'm a big fan of nature and animals and all that kind of stuff. So I just, dinosaurs and all that. So it's so fascinating and fun to create new life, new organisms, new entities. Really, one thing I would really like to do whenever I have the bandwidth to do it would just be, creating these creatures and these entities and interacting with them, in virtual reality. I mean, it's literally like, poor man's Dr. Frankenstein, where you create these things and then you get to put on your goggles and go in and engage with them. I mean, walk around and look at them while they're standing there just sort of breathing and looking at you, and their eyes are following you around, and they're kind of, idling and standing and moving back and forth and looking at you. Like, that seems like a pretty surreal adventure to take something from your imagination and then to see it standing in front of you, living and breathing. Like, that's something that I'm looking forward to doing at some point.
Yeah, giving it life beyond just a picture.
Yeah, and creating life, like manifesting life, taking something out of the ether of your imagination and then having it just standing in front of you is just, to me, just such an extraordinary thing to be able to do, to reach into the the depths of your psyche and to pull something out and then to be able to just stand there and look at it. Seems like a fantastical thing to do.
Well, when it's making me think of all the times I've interacted with galactic beings and had visions, and if I had the tech know-how, because a lot of you guys know I'm not tech savvy, but if I have the tech know-how to use any of this stuff to kind of bring to life what I'm already interacting with, that's kind of interesting, because in a way we could almost bring to life, virtually anyway speaking, the beings that we're already interacting with.
Yeah, and that's another kind of thing I think about. I'm kind of waking up a little bit more and seeing the bigger picture and being aware of some of these things, and it would be pretty neat to kind of manifest or channel some of maybe those things into a sort of format that's more accessible to a wider audience who maybe isn't, as dialed in yet or what have you, and to sort of bring some of that stuff from the ether to show people, I think would be a pretty neat sort of thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many people, even myself included, even if it's not just a sheer activation, sometimes when you just look at something, it instantly gives you a download, or it's like, or you get a vision or you get some kind of intuitive hit. I have wondered about that. There are, I don't know if we've talked about this in private or not, or if it's something that you're already aware of, that there are archetypes that are relating to galactic beings and just people who have certain roles that they're supposed to be playing in this incarnation, right? And there is that artist archetype, and I have wondered if their role is really just to deliver truth and kind of activate people, and if their art is really just their downloads or these, virtual reality galactic beings. How quickly would that wake up the collective?
I mean, I think pretty much that's what art started out as, right? Like, cave drawings and, hieroglyphics, or, a lot of just visual symbolism. That's fundamentally, I think, what it was. I mean, art for entertainment is a kind of secondary byproduct of that. But originally, I think that's what it was. Like, what we're just kind of, riffing on right now, like primitive man beat us to it like 30,000 years ago with cave paintings. you know
Yeah, no, that's true. I would, yeah, no, I would agree for sure. And yeah, and people have studied those so much, and it's interesting too because at the end of the day, that is art, even though most people just take it as, oh, those are historical accountings, but it is
And
art. It
it
is
shows
art
you how
versus
timeless it
art.
is too, right? Like 30,000 years, we're still doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, hopefully we're not like, also putting shit out there that's like, way out of left field, like just random boobs and shit
Oh
like
yeah, we
that.
are. We
But
are.
yeah, we are.
You can count on us to do that.
Well, and it's interesting too, like talking about art and these like quote unquote historical accountings. I was watching a documentary and they were covering Egyptian porn, which I thought was so fascinating. But like they were these very detailed, like very painstakingly pieces of art and scrolls that was kind of like the porn of the day. Like imagine the amount of like creative uh, talent behind all of that it had to take place, and like we are looking at it as porn, but maybe it actually was more art back then. But it is kind of interesting when you think about how much has to go into that compared to now.
And the effort that went into a lot of that primitive art, I mean, statues and rock carvings and all that kind of stuff, like that's just not something I don't think you sit down for a couple hours and do. I mean, pretty significant effort. So that kind of shows you how important the expressions of these ideas were, where they would, labor over this stuff for, significant amounts of time, carving stone and what have you. Like, how important were these ideas and concepts to them that they put that much effort into it? And then how
Yeah.
much, and that in of itself, I think, implies a certain amount of significance or meaning, that they're putting that much effort into it. We might not fully understand what it meant. We might maybe take it a little for granted, or see it on a superficial level. How much meaning was there to that stuff for them to put that much effort into it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what I thought too, because it's like I'm looking at these scrolls and it's like they're beautiful. Like they're stunning and beautiful. And I can only imagine, like you said, how many hours and dedication it took to make that. And our 21st century, very 3D brains are reducing it to porn,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Like kind of simplifying it a little bit, just because we're so simplified now in so many ways, or we've been dumbed down a little bit. And so yeah, it probably meant a whole lot more than that, but that's just what we would probably
Yeah.
label it. Oh, look, the guy's got a boner, it must be porn. And it's like divine
Yeah.
scripture of calling forth life or something like that.
Yeah, and it also makes me think about all of the art depicting all the various gods and different cultures as well. It's like also just been reduced to, oh, those are just bedtime stories. Those are just
Yeah.
folklore from the day when all these cultures spent so much painstaking time in portraying gods that also are these like same archetypes, right? That
Yeah,
you've been
that
talking about.
the Egyptian Book of the Dead that I told you about. I was looking at that the other day, and it's illustrated, and
Mhm.
it's extraordinary. And I'm just looking at the intricacy of that artwork and the complexity of it, and it's mind blowing. It's intimidating. I'm like, oh my god, those guys are such amazing artists. What am I doing? Who am I kidding? It's mind blowing.
Does it make you want to go more classical
Yeah,
versus
just
digital?
what they did, and just their vision, and just creating that. And I have no clue what that means. Basically, I can only imagine. It's like, man, what if you even knew the meaning behind that? That would make the art 10 times full if you understood what was behind it. But I mean, that stuff's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as like coming back to art today, really quick, and artists today, because like I know so many people in the community have reached out to me about their art and also sent me some amazing stuff. I'm just like, oh my god, like I like to sketch and I like to paint, but like I am nowhere nearly as talented as many artists that have reached out to me. What advice do you have for them as far as really earning money from their craft? Because like we are all very spiritual people here, we're all very much like ascended or tapped in, whatever words that people want to use for themselves, but we'd still have to like feed ourselves, right? And so for a lot of people, like I guess that's also part of the reason why I want to do this episode, just to kind of empower artists, to make them like to kind of show them a way to keep progressing with their craft and in a way that can also help them support themselves.
I think one of the most important things that a person can do to become a successful artist, and this is like probably not this is the boring answer, but probably one of the more true answers, is to really,
The
yeah, it's
practical
the most
answer.
practical answer. That's probably the least appealing. But just really doing foundational work, really kind of studying art, learning the language and the skill and the craft, practicing fundamentals of art, drawing on a regular basis, exploring life drawing in particular can really teach you a lot about fluidity and form and gesture and rhythm, composition. You can practically learn everything there is to know. Well, maybe not quite that literally, but you can learn so much from life drawing, even if you're never going to have people or figures in your artwork. But yeah, essentially just putting some real effort into fundamentals, doing some drawing fundamental classes, studying the masters. That's one thing that I did. I spent some quality time just copying Michelangelo drawings and copying Leonardo da Vinci drawings, learning the language. Like Hunter S. Thompson rewrote, I forgot one of the books, like The Great Gatsby or something like that, but he literally like retyped the whole book himself to try to feel what it was like to write every word.
And it probably really helped with flow, I
Yeah,
imagine too.
yeah. And there's so much you learn, so much that you feel when you practice copying artwork that you won't get just by looking at it. So yeah, master copies are huge, because then you're sort of really getting a feeling for the language and energy behind the image. And that can really inform you. That's what really opens up your eyes to the possibilities in the language of art. So yeah, getting good at the fundamentals, and basically, to make a living at anything, you got to be good at it. And so putting some effort into being good at your craft. Sometimes I see people that, just put paint on canvas and then try to sell it or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you might not be able to make much of a living until you sort of develop the muscles and the skill to really be able to articulate your visions. Because that's what
Okay.
it comes down to. The more you practice, the more effectively you can articulate your visions, and the more effectively you can articulate your vision and your truth, the more it's going to resonate with people. And the more it resonates, the more successful you'll be. So that's probably one of the key points of being successful. But there's
Well,
a handful of other things too, but
well, I think that's really solid. Like even when you said you would copy Michelangelo, I was like, oh shit, like that like that makes so much sense. It sounds really hard, but it sounds so beneficial and really rewarding. Yeah, like if you're gonna do something and practice something, why not try to do it after the best?
yeah, if you want to play music, you got to learn the notes, so
Yeah.
it's the same thing. And it's funny too. It's, drawing and painting is fundamentally the same as music, in all the principles are the same, rhythm and harmony and balance, all that kind of stuff. It's just a different
Composition.
medium. Yeah. All the same principles apply. It's just a different medium. It goes in your eyes instead of your ears, but it's all those universals, creating those harmonies with whatever it is. That's what resonates with people and gets people to feel, what you're thinking. And that's what makes the art appealing and therefore genuinely marketable. And again, art is such a big, broad concept. I mean, there's lots of things you could do that I guess don't really entail that kind of stuff as well. But the more you can capture those ideas in whatever you're doing, I think the more successful you'll be.
And because you mentioned it, that so much of visual art and like painting, sketching, digital art as well, video game art is like so much about seeing versus music, which is hearing, but it's all the same principles and all like the same kind of fundamentals. There's been a lot of focus in the spiritual community on sound and sound healing and music and frequency and how that can also activate you. And so it's interesting that, like you were saying, it's the same fundamentals. So in my mind, not being like trying not to get nerdy about it, in my mind that just says that they follow the same kind of just laws of energy, which to me is like laws of physics in a way, and how we respond to it anyway.
Yeah, basically, it's just these universal laws of rhythm and harmony. I mean, I don't play music, but I would really like to. I feel like I'm missing out by not playing music. Hopefully, some point down the line when I have some more bandwidth, I would like to start playing music just to empower me as an individual. I think that's so ingrained in us, in our biology and our DNA, practically, and in
Oh
nature,
yeah.
in the universe. Sound is a universal thing.
Yeah, even our hearts make music, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's rhythms everywhere.
So with digital art and your video game art, do you ever, I don't know if you're allowed to answer this or not, but just given because I know that you've worked for some pretty big companies and some pretty well-known video games out there. Have you ever like slipped anything in that was probably like you weren't supposed to, but you did anyway, just for a creative license?
Maybe not that I wasn't supposed to or whatever, but every once in a while, if you can, yeah, I made like what was it, like a zombie delivery guy for a game, and he had his little outfit on, and so his name was Trevor, and it was like TLC delivery service on his cap. That's my initials, TLC. Little things like that. I think I did a vehicle for some other game. Shoot, I forgot what was on the back of the. I don't know if it was my whole name or something like that, but yeah, sometimes you'll slip little Easter eggs in just for yourself for fun. You got to put something on the name of the truck because you can't have like a brand name, right? So you got to have like
Yeah.
Crandall Tough or something like that. But yeah, it's kind of fun
Well,
to get that stuff in there once in a while. Makes mom proud.
oh, I'm sure. I'm sure your mom probably is very proud of that, actually, knowing
My
your mother.
brother.
And I know that, while we talked back, and we were talking about the Egyptian gods a little while ago, and that you were really feeling compelled to draw and to create them digitally. Did you ever follow that urge or that impulse?
I was noodling on something, a 3D sculpture. There's a program called Zbrush, which is a digital sculpting program. So basically, you draw in 3D. It's one of the coolest things I've ever come across in my life. It's an extraordinary software program. I highly recommend anybody checking it out. It's super cool. I think they might. It's like $600 or $800 for a copy of it, which isn't a whole lot for how amazing the program is. But I think there's also free versions and light duty versions. But yeah, I was messing around with an Anubis sculpture a while ago, which like most artists I never finished, but I've been thinking a lot more about that kind of stuff. Like that's part of the reason I got that Egyptian Book of the Dead
Hmm.
with the illustrations, was just to kind of start studying the art and maybe just doing some sketches, doing some master copies of that. Just like I did Michelangelo copies, I'd like to do some Egyptian hieroglyphics copies to kind of just absorb and feel what was going on with that. I would like to do some more. That's another thing I would like to do with some virtual reality projects, would just to kind of be learn more about that stuff, but build and create some sort of hall of the gods or something like that, with
Oh,
statues of the gods in a cavern or something like that, and you could walk in there and walk around this great cavern with all the statues. Like that would be super fun to create and incredibly compelling to, I think, experience.
I have the chills as you're talking about
Yeah,
that. Sorry, I had to add
yeah,
that.
that's kind of a longer term vision while I'm learning more about this stuff, because I would like to recreate it in virtual reality, try to see it and feel it a little bit more. Because again, like I said before, your brain doesn't really know the difference,
Yeah.
a lot of times. So your brain will respond as if it's real. So it would be a really interesting thing to explore.
Well, and especially with, for those in the community that are in this boat, because not everybody's quite up to this point in the collective of realizing that there is a waking up or kind of like a resurrection of understanding gods and goddesses and understanding that it's more than just mythology. Some people are waking up to really who they are galactically, which for some also equates to these beings that we've labeled as gods and goddesses. And so if you could recreate the essence of what it would be like to be in that time, or to even be around beings in this like god goddess form, that would probably wake up so many people who need to be woken up.
Yeah, and to kind of be knowledgeable enough and to understand it enough, and to interpret it effectively enough to be able to recreate it in a way that is hopefully authentic, and compelling, and a bit more than just the superficial sort of character that is presented to us,
Mm-hmm.
in mythology or in a book or in an illustration or something. Hopefully in a couple years of learning or something, maybe I'll get to a point where I have a pretty decent understanding of it, where I could recreate something that is a lot more compelling than just a page in a book.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's getting me excited at the possibilities. I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully a lot of artists that are listening, or just artists in general, will actually start to do these things. Because I mean, as of right now, well, that's the other thing. I like games, but I don't have time to play games. Right. So even for myself, I'm not aware as to what games are out there that kind of lean towards accuracy
Mhm.
of a lot of this stuff. You would know better than me for that answer. But do you think there are a lot of games out there like that right now, or not really?
What do you mean accuracy? Like just base?
Like how you were saying, like more accurate depictions of certain places in time or certain eras, or like what it would really be like to be there when these crazy events went down.
Yeah, I mean, games in general, they do a pretty good job of a lot of these things, because these are, multi-million dollar productions. Games are bigger than film now. It's really crazy. And they have massive financial backing. And so when they have that, they've got these teams and teams of artists that spend tons and, months or years researching, a lot of these things, or flying around the world, going to the locations to take pictures. They'll photo scan, they'll take pictures, and the photographs are converted to 3D geometry and go into the game so they can actually recreate places like 100% accurately, basically, practically. And then you can throw in
Mhm.
like satellite scanning and all that kind of thing too. So yeah, they do a really amazing job of recreating times and places and periods. And then also too, like, so many games are fantastical. They're not based in reality. They're these unique, fantasy or whatever themes, and the depth and the realism of those is amazing. I mean, that's almost more cooler that they create these extraordinary worlds of imagination. And so, yeah, any sort of concentrated effort into any idea, I think you can create something really compelling. And then also too, like, we to double back a little bit, how virtual reality in some ways is almost basically fundamental, the next a phase or the next stage of human consciousness and evolution on some level. I think that'll be more and more a part of our reality over the coming decades. So then,
Yeah.
if we're creating our own virtual reality experiences, as virtual reality becomes more of our conscious experience in our life, then fundamentally we're creating our reality. We're steering the ship, which is a pretty interesting idea to think about.
So do you think we should just get on it now and just start using VR to create the Earth we want? Might not be a bad
Yeah,
idea, honestly, from the way it
yeah,
sounds.
it's there to be had. It's there for the taking. It's there to be created. It's a neat idea. VR is not super accessible right now. You got to have a
Yeah,
$600 headset or whatever, and a personal computer. So it's still pretty niche, but it's not going anywhere. It's only going to expand over the next, years, and it's going to be a whole lot of new horizons. And the more artists that are
yeah.
out there creating, that are inspired, putting some authentic, soulful visions out there, how might that steer the ship of humanity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even the way it's used in healing, like in medicine, is really kind of astonishing. I think that also just shows really the power of consciousness too, and how it affects our physical vessels.
Yeah, yeah, healing too. That's kind of a neat idea, for PTSD or some sort of traumas or something. What sort of experiences, what sort of, I don't know, maybe peaceful, beautiful experiences, whatever it takes, could you create to help people overcome issues or traumas or get past blockages? That's another really sort of neat, interesting avenue.
Yeah, definitely. So just a couple last questions before we wrap it up. Well, maybe it's really just one question, just to bring it more to the practical kind
Yeah.
of advice for artists out there. So for those kind of artists that are into digital art or want to get into that, or even video game art, what softwares do you recommend they start out with, like learning
Sure,
anyway?
yeah, that's a super good question, and it's pretty exciting, the landscape right now. So a lot of software is becoming very accessible. Software 10, 20 years ago, like 3D programs cost, like, dude, I don't even know, 100,000. I think it might have been like $250,000 for like one copy of Autodesk Maya on a very special PC computer. And now 3D software is free. And so there's actually a 3D software program called Blender which has been around for like 10 years, and it's an open source 3D software program. And over the course of the last 2 years, it's basically, everybody's been working on it for a decade, contributing to it. And over the course of the last 2 years, it's become a professional quality software package that's now being used in mainstream production. I'm even looking at videos of it, and, probably potentially going to switch over to it eventually, partly so for teaching. I'd like to do some teaching and mentoring a little later on down the line, and I'd like to learn Blender just so anybody has access to, that tool. They don't need to pay money for 3D software.
Yeah.
Another super amazing software program is something called Unreal Engine, and that's a game engine. So that's basically the software you make a video game with. And so that's the bowl that you throw all the ingredients in to make the game. So, you might build your monster in Blender or Maya or Modo, or you might do your animation in 3D Studio Max or whatever. But ultimately, all that data needs to go into a game engine. An Unreal Engine, which used to cost like $10 or $20 million to lease it for a project, is now free. So you can literally get a 3D software program called Blender for free, and you can get Unreal Engine for free. And there's massive amounts of tutorials and resources online, so you don't have to go to school to learn it. Like, that's another thing about all this stuff. I don't have a degree. I went to school for a year when I started out. And then at the end of the year, I realized that almost everything I had just learned online, Googling and watching videos or whatever. And I just didn't see the point of paying for an education when everything was online for free. And this was 15 years ago, so there's way more resources now. So I just dropped out and started learning on my own. I went to art school to learn like traditional art, to learn drawing and painting, like the foundational stuff. That's worth taking classes for. But all the software, you don't need to pay to learn that. And in fact, if you are paying to learn that, you're probably going to get ripped off. And that's a whole other topic of discussion. But, a lot of these universities that have degrees, it's like a 2 or a 4 year degree, and you got to pay all these thousands of dollars. And then most of your time isn't even spent learning the software and the tools you need, because you're taking English classes and prereqs and a bunch of junk just for the sake of going to, an accredited school. And it's a money sink and a time sink. And so, all this stuff you can learn for free. Like, nobody's ever asked me where I went to school. They just look at my artwork and they're like, oh, dang, when can you start? That's the key. If you just get good and you're good. That's it. So Unreal Engine and Blender will get you rolling. Substance Painter is a texturing program, which costs money, but it's a mainstream tool. So I'm just throwing it out there so folks can get familiar with it. But all that stuff is accessible, and it's out there, and it's free, and the barrier to entry is so low. And so all you really need is some time and dedication, and you could potentially make things happen. And you don't even necessarily need to get a job at a video game studio. I mean, you could make, 3D models and then sell those for 3D printing. You could make jewelry, right? You could get Blender for free and then design jewelry and then sell those files different marketplaces for money. Make cool jewelry and pendants and rings, and they can be printed in metal and plastic and all sorts of things. So there's lots of really neat outlets.
Really quickly, what are some of the marketplaces? Because you said that you can sell these things that you create on marketplaces. Can you name a couple?
I'm only just now really starting to think about that stuff. I can tell you that so Unreal Engine is the one sort of primary game engine that's being used now, and that's Unreal Engine's the future as well. So not only are video game companies using this software, the software has gotten so powerful that now movie production studios are using it. And then with especially virtual reality, now NASA is using it, and SpaceX is using it, and Tesla is using it, and Ferrari is using it. So all of these, high profile sort of amazing companies around the world are using this technology. Like, I could go work at NASA right now. Like, that's crazy. I mean, I could literally go help them design a virtual reality Mars rover experience to start colonizing Mars. They're using the same software I use at work every day. And so, there's so many opportunities. But so, Unreal Engine has a marketplace where you can create items, right? So maybe you can create, Viking battle axes or, whatever you want to do that you think is cool. And then people out there making video games will go on the marketplace and buy your products. Oh, hey, I need this, I need that. So you could make a living as a 3D artist independently by yourself, just creating content and selling it on marketplaces. Unity game engine is another one. Not quite as big and as popular as Unreal Engine. Hasn't been around for as long, but still a pretty good piece of software. They have their own marketplace. So yeah, you could be selling that. And then I don't know where the 3D printing ones would be. I haven't pursued that too much, but I do know that it exists, and that's becoming more and more popular as well.
All right. So this is awesome. I mean, I think that's giving people some really solid advice and like just really quick, like where to go and like how to just start their own kind of journey to making a living off of their own art, which I think is really important right now. Yeah. So artists, go out, go create, go start making the reality we need.
Yeah,
Go start waking people up with your
yeah,
art.
it's there for the creating, and the tools are out there, and with the internet and Instagram, and everybody's interconnected. I think there's a guy named Kevin Kelly. I think he's like the founder of Wired or something like that. And he's got this thing he wrote like 10 years ago, and it's called like 1,000 True Fans. And basically his premise is that, there's billions of people online. And if you can just find 1,000 people that love what you do and are willing to pay $10 or $20 or $30 a year, $50 a year, like you can make a living, and 1,000 people appreciating what you do out of 3 billion, that doesn't take much to reach that kind of critical mass. And so being successful is really accessible right now. And so it's a really exciting time when we're having this artistic renaissance, and this time of kind of extraordinary change and revolution. So yeah, like the landscape is primed for artists right now. So it's a great time to pursue it and put your heart and soul into it. And also it's fun. I mean, it's a wonderful way to spend your time. It's very engaging and fulfilling when you create.
Oh yeah. And very like cathartic,
Yeah.
therapeutic too. I would but thank you so much for hanging out and like just talking and waxing philosophical and giving some really good advice. And can you tell people where they can find you, or if they want to like look at your art or anything like that?
I'm on Instagram. I'm TC_3D. I don't have a whole lot going there. I suck at the social media thing. There's some stuff. Trevor Crandall, TREVOR, last name Crandall, CRANDALL.com. There's some stuff there. That's a website. That's pretty outdated too. There's some photography there too, though. And then ArtStation. My main portfolio is on ArtStation, so you could just Google Trevor Crandall plus ArtStation. You'll probably come across it. And also, too, just go to ArtStation and look at the art there. It can be a little intimidating, but don't let it intimidate you. Let it inspire you. Yeah, check out the website and see so many amazing artists from all over the world. It's really cool.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys later. Namaste.